Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Heartland Institute for making this fabulous conference possible. If any aspect of modern environmentalism rises above the others, it is the movement's implacable opposition to fossil fuels, the abundant, reliable, affordable energy that powers civilization and makes our industries, livelihoods, healthcare, nutrition, and living standards possible. But of course, advancing this viewpoint, movement, and agenda requires more than simply saying, we hate fossil fuels. As the Club of Rome recognized decades ago, achieving these goals requires creating a common enemy against whom we can unite. What's needed is allegedly looming disasters caused by human intervention in natural processes and requiring changed attitudes and behavior to avoid global calamities. Threats to the very survival of our wildlife, civilization, and planet. Equally essential from the activist perspective is that they and their government allies be in charge, in control, to end fossil fuel use and prevent these catastrophes. Of course, the first looming disaster is dangerous man-made climate change, or global warming, the catastrophic human-caused changes in our climate and its many convoluted, exaggerated, and fabricated disaster scenarios. The second looming disaster is the equally phony and actually evil twin of the first. Resource depletion, the assertion that humanity is rapidly exhausting the energy and other natural resources that enable societies to function, and that future generations are going to need to survive and prosper at whatever level the environmentalist factions might permit. Preventing this disaster requires sustainable development, or sustainability. The two concepts have become the primary justification for blocking energy and economic growth, rolling back first world living standards, de-developing the United States and other industrialized countries, and preventing all but minimal development in the third world. Climate change and sustainability are also linked inextricably to a third mantra, the so-called precautionary principle. This is the extreme end of the risk management spectrum. It's the assertion that no action, policy, or technology should be permitted until its promoters can conclusively prove it will not harm society, humanity, or the environment. The three mantras are brilliant in their simplicity and their audacity. Whatever environmentalist extremists hate or despise is climate threatening, unsustainable, and intolerably dangerous. Whatever they support, promote, or will profit from is earth friendly, climate stabilizing, sustainable, and safe. To further ensure the desired policy and power outcome, climate sustainability and precautionary principles examine only risks and harms that a despised action, policy, or technology might cause. They never consider the dangers and damages that might be reduced, prevented, or eliminated. How do we respond? We challenge their supposed consensus. We eviscerate their claims. We show that their mantras, agendas, and alternatives are not just wrong, they're unethical and unsustainable. They damage wildlife and the environment, insult human dignity, reduce human living standards and lifespans, and are especially harmful to the most impoverished, malnourished, disease-ravaged, energy-deprived, and politically powerless people on our planet. They're inhumane and eco-imperialistic, and they're even genocidal. My South African friend, Leon Lowe, has put it this way: for environmentalists to tell destitute people they must never aspire to living standards much better than they have now because it wouldn't be sustainable is just one more example of the hypocrisy we have had thrust in our faces in an era when we can and should grow fast enough to become fully developed in a single generation. We're fed up with it. And yet, the anti-development attitudes and policies continue. Now, don't get me wrong. I strongly support real sustainability. Excuse me. I lost my place here a second. I strongly support real sustainability, and that is the thoughtful, caring, responsible, economical stewardship and conservation of land, water, energy, metallic, forest, wildlife, and other natural resources. And I think responsible businesses, families, and communities do this every day. What I'm not a fan of is public relations sustainability. This involves bland, superficial, unverifiable, corporate image-enhancing assertions that a company is devoted to renewable fuels, sustainability, corporate responsibility, environmental justice, reducing its carbon footprints, or saving polar bears, for instance. And they do this to garner favorable press or to appease radical environmental groups. It rarely works. What I despise and oppose and want to discuss today is political or politicized sustainability and its realities, absurdities, and duplicities. Like dangerous man-made global warming or climate change, political sustainability relies on ideological assertions and theoretical computer models as an alternative to actual outside our windows reality. Its purpose is to gain greater government and agitator control over people's energy use, lives, livelihoods, liberties, and living standards. It reflects a poor understanding of basic energy, economic, resource extraction, manufacturing, and human rights realities, and in fact, it rejects all of the above. The most common definition is that we may meet the needs of current generations only to the extent that doing so will not compromise the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Sustainability thus reflects the assertion that we're rapidly depleting finite resources and must reduce our current needs and wants in order to save these resources for future generations. You know, at first blush it sounds logical and maybe even ethical, but think about it a minute. Under sustainability precepts, we're supposed to predict future technologies and ensure that today's resource needs will not compromise the completely unpredictable energy and raw material requirements that those completely unpredictable future technologies will require. We're also supposed to safeguard the assumed needs of future generations, even if it means ignoring or compromising the very undeniable, very real needs of current generations, including the needs, aspirations, health, and welfare of the world's poorest people, who desperately want to improve their lives. And somehow we're presumably supposed to do this for generation after generation. For thousands of years, humanity advanced at a snail's pace. As the modern fossil fuel industrial era found its footing, progress picked up rapidly until the speed of change became almost exponential. How today is anyone supposed to predict what might be in store 10, 50, 100 years from now? It can't be done. Moreover, as we moved from flint to copper to bronze, iron, steel, and way beyond, we didn't do so because mankind had exhausted these raw materials. We did it because we innovated. We invented something better, more practical, more efficient, and each advance required different raw materials. Who today can foresee what raw materials future technologies will require? How are we supposed to know that and ensure that future families meet their needs if we cannot possibly know what those needs will be? Sustainability is like some Stone Age bureaucrat worrying endlessly about the looming depletion of known flint and obsidian deposits. Why then would we even think of empowering government to regulate today's activities based on the wholly unpredictable technologies, lifestyles, needs, and resource demands of future generations? Why would we ignore or compromise the pressing needs of current generations to meet those totally unpredictable future needs? Resource depletion claims also fail to account for new technologies that increase energy and mineral reserves, reduce their costs, or decrease the need for certain raw materials like copper, because lightweight fiber optic cables made from silica, one of Earth's most abundant resources, can carry thousands of times more information than a huge bundle of copper wires that weigh 800 times more. And in 1887, when Wisconsin's Hearthstone house became the world's first home lit by hydroelectric power, no one could possibly foresee how electricity would dominate, enhance, and safeguard our lives in the myriad ways that it does today. No one could envision the many ways we generate that electricity today. A century later, no one predicted tiny cellular phones with amazing digital cameras and more computing power than a desktop computer had in 1990, or thousands of wind turbines sprawling across our mountaintops and fruited plains. No one expected we would need so much cadmium, lithium, rare earth metals, or other raw materials to manufacture these technological wonders and abominations. No one anticipated that 4D seismic technologies, new deep-water drilling technologies, and hydraulic fracturing, for example, could find and produce so much oil and natural gas that we still have at least a century's worth of these vital resources, when experts had told us just a decade ago we had less than 25 years left. And yet, with these amazing true stories staring us right in the face, we're still supposed to predict the future 50 or 100 years from now, safeguard the assumed needs of future generations, and ignore the needs of current generations. Remember one other important fact about all of this. Our natural resources, including energy, our master resource, don't have to last forever. They only have to last long enough for our ultimate resource, our creative intellects, to discover replacements, new deposits, production techniques, raw material substitutes, or technologies. And of course, all of this is irrelevant to politicized sustainability dogma, which focuses on ridding the world of fossil fuels regardless of any social, economic, environmental, or human costs of doing so. And regardless of whether supposed alternatives really are green, eco-friendly, or sustainable. Mandated U.S. ethanol quotas eat up 40% of this nation's corn, cropland the size of Iowa, billions of gallons of water, and vast quantities of pesticides, fertilizers, tractor fuel, and natural gas to produce energy that drive up food prices, adversely affect food aid and nutrition, damage small engines, and get 1/3 less mileage per gallon than gasoline. Heavily subsidized wind turbines require millions of acres for turbines and ultra-long transmission lines and millions of tons of concrete, steel, copper, rare earth metals, and fiberglass. The turbines create chronic health problems for people living near them and kill millions of birds and bats annually to produce intermittent, unreliable, budget-busting, job-killing electricity that costs twice as much as coal or gas-fueled electricity and must be backed up by fossil fuel generators that have to go from standby to full power dozens of times a day every time the wind stops blowing. In the meantime, American and Canadian companies are cutting down millions of acres of forest habitats. There we are. Forest habitats. Turning millions of trees into wood pellets that they truck to coastal ports and transport on oil-fueled cargo ships to England to be hauled by truck and burned in place of coal to generate electricity so that England can meet its renewable fuel targets. And to top it off, the pellets, of course, cost more than coal, which Britain still has in abundance. So utility companies receive hundreds of millions of dollars every year in taxpayer and consumer subsidies to make up the difference. It's pretty crazy. They also have huge anaerobic digesters that don't have enough farm waste to fuel them, so they grow fuel crops on 130,000 acres of farmland, that's 4 times the size of Washington, D.C., specifically for the purpose of burning those fuels in the digesters, or converting them. And of course, when these biofuels are burned, they still generate climate-wrecking carbon dioxide. So I ask, why not just build the fossil fuel power plants and drill and frack for natural gas to fuel them and forget about the wind turbines, digesters, wood pellets, and other pseudo-renewable, pseudo-sustainable, pseudo-alternatives? Well, because it's not about real sustainability. It's about activist politicians, regulators, and crony capitalists imposing their views, controlling people's lives, dictating energy use and economic growth and living standards, and getting richer in the process. As World Watch Institute founder Lester Brown put it, Building an environmentally sustainable future requires restricting the global economy, dramatically changing human reproductive behavior, and altering values and lifestyles. Doing this quickly requires nothing short of a revolution. Here's former Vice President Al Gore's perspective. Minor shifts in policy, moderate improvements in laws and regulations, rhetoric offered in lieu of genuine change, these are all forms of appeasement designed to satisfy the public's desire to believe that sacrifice, struggle, and a wrenching transformation of society will not be necessary. Of course, the activist politicians and regulators and industrials will feel little pain as they enjoy salaries and perks paid by taxpayers, consumers, and foundations, fly to UN and other conferences at posh five-star resorts around the world, and implement agendas that redesign, control, and transform other people's lives. It's we, the governed, especially poor and minority and working class citizens, who will suffer worst, and the world's poorest families who will pay the biggest price. More than 1.2 billion people still do not have electricity. Another 2 billion worldwide have electrical power only sporadically and unpredictably. In India alone, more people than live in the USA still lack electricity. In sub-Saharan Africa, number of people equal to those living in Europe still cook and heat with wood, charcoal, and animal dung. Hundreds of millions get horribly sick. 5 million die every year from lung and intestinal diseases due to breathing smoke from their open fires and not having refrigeration, clean water, and safe food. They are being told they must be content with a few wind turbines near their villages, solar panels on their huts, and sustainable, climate-friendly, solar-powered cook stoves that manage to cook an egg in maybe 40 minutes. President Obama told President Obama told Africans they should refrain from using dirty fossil fuels and focus instead on their bountiful wind, solar, and geothermal and biofuel energy. His agencies repeatedly turned down requests for loans to build fossil fuel powered plants in Africa. And in 2013, he issued a Power Africa initiative that focused on sustainable development and sustainable energy instead of what people really need over there. True sustainable development improves living standards instead of paying mere lip service to them. It allows people the freedom to develop and use technologies and practices that conserve resources, reduce waste and pollution, and ensure that current generations maintain their living standards in industrialized nations and have the energy and resources needed in poor countries to end the poverty, disease, and malnutrition that for too long have made life there nasty, brutish, and short. In simple terms, real sustainability tells poor nations, don't do what rich countries are doing now that they are rich. Do what rich countries did to become rich, and do it as responsible stewards of God's creation. Real sustainability enables people of today to prosper, leaves the world better than we found it, and paves the way for future generations to benefit from the wisdom and innovations that we, their predecessors, have developed. We should do everything possible to make that happen. Anything less deserves our scorn and opposition. Thank you.